All right. Well, it looks like people are coming into the session. We want to welcome everyone to the session on industrial SEM and kind of talking about the state of SEM and where we are right now. I think that this panel really tees us up, if I may, also for the SEM Summit coming up next week. If you haven't already registered, you can register. It's Tuesday and Wednesday next week. We look forward to engaging with the SEM community there. It will be a kind of about where we are, but also where we're going. We've learned a lot in the last year, and so it's time to start rethinking SEM. So we're hoping to engage the community to do that. And without further ado, maybe what I'll do is a round of introductions and then kick off with the panelist questions. So our plan is to do a round of introductions and then ask one common question to all the panelists here today. And then after that, we will be asking individual questions. We're hoping for about 10 minutes too of audience participation, where you can ask a question in the chat or raise your hand. And if you want to ask it to a specific person, just feel free to let us know who that person is. All right. So my name is Wendy Gibson. I'm the Senior Program Manager at Energy Trust of Oregon, where I oversee the existing buildings program, and that includes strategic energy management. In my free time, I am doing something that I have never done before. I am training to run the Grand Canyon in October. So you may think, wow, she sounds crazy. I think, well, that's probably true. Ethan Rogers with the Department of Energy. He is the technical manager with responsibility for ISO 50001 related to energy management programs within the Advanced Manufacturing Office of the U.S. Department of Energy. Ethan has a collection of well over 100 ties, 24 of which are Jerry Garcia ties, and another 24 are holiday ties. But I don't think Ethan currently has any of those ties on. Nope. All right.
Post-tie environment.
What are you going to do with your ties? That's the question. Are you going to keep them?
I don't know.
All right. Yet to be seen. We'll ask you next year.
Yep.
Walt Tennyson with the EPA is the Energy Star Industrial Program Manager, where he helps advance strategic energy management practices and decarbonization at the corporate level. In his free time, he enjoys harnessing wind power to propel boats. Well, that is great. Walt, when was the last time you were on your boat?
Last night for a race.
Oh, did you win? Do we have a winner in our midst?
No, we came in last.
Well, that's a special kind of award too. So I love it. Gail Boyd says tie quilt for Ethan. Does anybody know how to sew here? We can make a tie quilt for Ethan. All right, Tamara Berger with BC Hydro. She leads the industrial marketing program team. She is responsible for energy efficiency and low carbon electrification initiatives for customers in British Columbia. She has spent the past decade plus working on strategic energy management. Tamara lives in Vancouver, BC, and spends her free time learning how to be a better plant parent and searching for new playgrounds with her human children. Tamara, did your plant survive the heat wave? Oh, did we lose Tamara?
Oh, sorry. No, I just was on mute and I thought I clicked and I didn't. But the heat dome wasn't very kind to a lot of our plants, but they're coming back. So I've got hope. I've done a lot of Googling, and thank goodness for Google. Over the pandemic, I've learned a lot of new skills.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody whose father is an arborist, and he said, do not cut the dead plant pieces because they will actually shade the plant underneath, and then do a deep water once a week. So, right.
Good tips.
All right. Glenda Towns with SoCal Gas. Glenda is an energy efficiency program advisor at Southern California Gas Company, where she has worked for 24 years. And Glenda, I didn't get a personal note, but do you have one you want to share?
Well, actually, I have not been at the gas company for 24 years.
Oh.
I've been in the energy industry since the 70s, believe it, during the initial oil embargo. So I go way back. I was at Southern California Edison for 24 years. And then I took some time off to stay at home with the children, and then returned to work in 2006. So I've been with the gas company for 15 years.
Ah, gotcha. All right. Well, that's still a long record right there.
Yes.
Okay, so the first question we have for the panelist is, what effects has the pandemic had on your customers? And how have these effects shifted the way you support your customers? So Ethan, let's start with you first. You've got 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, we're already dealing fairly remotely with most of our customers since we're a national program. But in the Superior Energy Performance Program, there are audits that have to be done by third parties, and those had to be done in person. And so working with ISO, we were able to get kind of waivers and delays to these things. So the SCP program, it took a while to work it all out, but we're able to keep organizations moving forward in that. And then the other thing that just kind of surprised me more broadly was the number of programs out there that we're connected with that were able to do audits virtually. They'd send people in with cameras and things like that. So I was really surprised how quickly people picked up on that. The speed with which things like Zoom and we'd all used Skype before, right? But it didn't always work. Now stuff works, and the fact that happened within a matter of months was really impressive to me.
Great, thank you so much. Glenda, do you want to pick up on where Ethan left off?
Sure. As far as here in California, the pandemic, as far as the industrial facilities are concerned, all of our industrial facilities that we were working with stayed open. Many of them had to, of course, adjust their shifts because of the pandemic, but most of them stayed open. Site visits were suspended for several months at most of the facilities because of the stay-at-home order that we had here in California. As far as staffing goes, that remains tight in California. Primarily right now it's tight because of the COVID-19 supplemental paid sick leave program that's going to still be in effect through September 30th. So hopefully staffing availability will pick up, but right now there's still a lot of hiring signs in front of our many of our businesses here in California. And as far as the sector that was most impacted by the pandemic, that was our aerospace industry. And we don't think they're likely to recover fully for at least a couple more years. Piggybacking on what the other gentleman just said, we had to adjust our program offering for SEM to become more flexible. We also turned to virtual walkthrough treasure hunts and provided our customers tools whereby we could talk with them virtually while walking through the plant and trying to identify opportunities that they can implement at their facility. And as far as the pandemic, again, another impact is that we're seeing more and more automation beginning to become a very important factor mainly because of the staff issue. So more and more of our customers are having to turn to automation to help them meet the needs of their company. As far as one of the biggest struggles for us here with the pandemic has also, again, relating to staff, has to do with time. Our customers, one of the biggest obstacles with SEM has always been getting customers to allocate human resources to give us the time that we need for them to gather production data, et cetera. So time is a very important factor that's only gotten worse because there's more limited resources at many of our customer facilities.
Right. Yeah. Time. I'm hearing innovation around virtual workshops or virtual treasure hunts are two things. Yeah. Tamara, how about you?
Sure. So, I mean, there are big changes for us on our industrial side as well. We offer our programs across the province, and so there are definitely region-specific ones. On the recruitment side, there were changes where customers had maybe previously been about to sign on for a program, and then things shifted dramatically within their industry. Maybe super high demand, and they just couldn't focus on maybe starting a new program. There were others that had more of an opportunity now because they didn't have that demand to start looking for other tools, ways to build resilience within their organizations, and SEM they saw as a tool for that. So that was positive there. In terms of the customers that were already participating in our SEM offers, we continued to see strong engagement, which was really positive. I think the long-term relationships we've built through having continuous SEM offerings really help support that. That sort of feeling of everyone's in this all together in terms of having to make that switch over to virtual, I think also helped, because previous to that, BC Hydro and our customers were very used to working in person. All our walkthroughs, our workshops, everything, people were willing to take that time to travel, and that just wasn't possible anymore. We actually haven't really opened up travel up until very, very recently here in BC. So everyone pivoted very quickly to virtual. We saw an uptick in terms of attendance for virtual workshops. I think the ability to have someone log in from a computer for a couple hours as opposed to having to travel for a full day did help be able to spread the ability for you to invite a team member that might not normally be able to attend and make it out for an in-person workshop. So that was really positive. I think some of that awareness spread a little further within companies, but that depth of engagement from a virtual workshop, I do think just isn't quite there compared to some of those in-person things. But I think the real benefit we have here now is that experience with everyone being exposed to virtual options, whether it be an energy scan or a treasure hunt or an energy management assessment. And then now us being able to offer that in the future so that there are options, that we can have cohorts that have customers across the province as opposed to just in one specific region, because now they don't have to work in that travel time necessarily. So I think that opens up some more things for our customers moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're not the only program experiencing that, right? More engagement, but can you get as deep? It's an interesting conversation. I think kind of more innovation will tell. And finally, Walt, how about you? What about the pandemic? How has it affected your customers?
Well, the people that we typically work with are corporate energy managers, and a lot of them were not able to travel and were not able to do things like treasure hunts. And last year was the year we were going to really promote our Find the Treasure campaign, which is sort of a recognition campaign. And we also asked people to share their findings on energy treasure hunts. And we saw obviously a lot of people not doing treasure hunts, so we didn't really see a big uptake in that. Different sectors were impacted differently. Some sectors were like in overproduction and others were in shutdown. And so another thing we've observed is that, we're going to see, particularly this year, a lot less plants qualifying for Energy Star certification in certain sectors simply because production was down. We're also probably going to see a drop off in some plants that might have achieved the challenge, although we granted people an extension for that. So some of the impacts just caused by different production, lower production, are going to show up in people's energy performance and how that affects our energy program. On the upside, as others have mentioned, I think we saw some innovation with people developing virtual methods for things like treasure hunts. We put out some virtual treasure hunt tips based on what our partners were doing. The other thing where I also found that a lot of people were focusing their time because they couldn't travel, and also because we typically work at the corporate levels, a lot of people really began to focus on developing decarbonization roadmaps. So a lot of people use that time when they weren't traveling to be a little more in a planning mode, looking at some longer term planning, and that I think is going to be important for these companies as they go forward, since more companies are putting out net zero goals or science-based target type reductions. And so a lot of our partners, took advantage of that time to do that planning.
That's great, Walt. I think that's a really important conversation, right? Decarbonization and how you get there. That planning is great to see that pivot shift. All right, this question is for Tamara with BC Hydro. What continues to be your biggest struggle with engaging your industrial customers in SEM?
Sure. So, I think the biggest challenge is also one of my favorite parts of the program, which is the people. And people are at the core of our SEM offers. and people, because there's not just one person at any given organization. And so us being able to continually engage customers over long periods of time, potentially continuing to show value and having offers that are flexible enough to meet customers where they're at. Whether they're just getting into SEM, starting from scratch and needing to figure out, what makes sense for them to do, how to engage the staff at site who are not necessarily inclined to want to do some of these new things, versus customers who've been there for a decade plus and are pretty mature and need to get to that next advanced level of what is SEM. So that's a continuous challenge. I think it's, continuous improvement is sort of the name of the game for it. So it all kind of makes sense there. But and then also how we make sure we're continuing to get value for our ratepayers and our program and be able to stay cost effective. So there's a whole bunch of things there, but some of the ways we've been able to help build and maintain that pipeline of future energy champions and energy managers is offering things like fully funded co-op positions, which is a university student who's going to work with an energy manager and helps build out that team and sort of that training and that community. Having an influx of younger energy managers as well coming in and having that diversity helps a lot as well. I think at the end of the day, it's just continuing to keep that focus on the people though, knowing that we have all of the processes and we can put in standard operating procedures and systems and EMIS and all of that kind of things to support it. But at the end of the day, it is the people that are there that are running it. So when you have turnover, making sure you have succession planning in place and all of that to continue to keep these programs running and successful.
Yeah, Tamara, I think you brought up something really interesting too, without kind of saying it, which is workforce development, right? It's about people. And it's about also helping bring up the next generation. And how do we do that? How do we do that in a diverse way? And being able to pay for interns or some sort of support, I think, is really important. There, in Pretty Woman, Julia Roberts she's opening an oyster, and I think the oyster slips and it flies out of her hand, and she goes, "Slippery little sucker." And that's what I think about humans, right? They're slippery little suckers. Like, you just can't. You want them to do something, and sometimes you can't. But I think that if we bring them up, we can really help move SEM forward. So I think that's a really big, important part. Thank you. All right, Glenda, this question is for you. What will the next 5 years look like for your industrial customers, and how will programs for you likely evolve in that time?
Good question, Wendy. Give me that crystal ball. It's a very difficult question to answer because there's just so many moving parts that affect this area as far as looking into the future. For instance, our national policy is still evolving when it comes to climate change and how that will affect our customers. However, SoCalGas is supporting California's clean energy policies, which are becoming more rigorous, combined with our customer focus on reducing carbon footprint. Also, artificial intelligence, as I mentioned before, in automation systems is becoming more widely available to our customers. So we expect that to be part of our 5-year future. And as we see in our daily news, the long-term impact of COVID remains unclear. Every time we think it's gone, it pops back up again. So we shall see. Because of COVID and other factors, the economic outlook for different industry sectors is uncertain. As I mentioned, it has impacted the aerospace industry tremendously. And in general, I'd say that just re-emphasizing SoCalGas's mission, which is to build the cleanest, safest, and most innovative energy company in America. I don't know if you heard about our news announcement, but we are committed to achieve our goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions in our operations and delivery of energy by 2045. That's only 24 years, and believe me, that's an ambitious goal that we intend to meet. That means the scope of emissions associated with our customers' use of gas. We will get there through increased utilization of green hydrogen, renewable natural gas, and a focus on energy efficiency. Customers will be increasingly driven by improving the sustainability of their operations. Also, customers may face some retooling as hydrogen and renewable gas is added to our pipeline mix. We should also expect in the next 5 years, energy costs for customers are likely to rise. But as you know, this can be managed through the importance of energy efficiency for our customers. So we'll still be there by our customer's side, helping them.
Great.
I have one more thing.
Okay.
Energy resilience is becoming increasingly important. As for the gas system, what we see there is going to be extremely important to understand that for SoCal Gas, the gas system has demonstrated its resilience in extreme weather events and is a reliable source of affordable energy for our customers. Other than staffing and expertise, that's going to continue to remain tight. I think that's the bulk of what we're looking forward to in the next 5 years, what we will have to deal with.
Great. Thanks, Glenda. You said a couple things that really made me think of SEM. One is the rise of technology and artificial intelligence. How do SEM coaches, how do SEM implementers stay up to speed with all the new technology that's coming and support customers to make sure those are more efficient? Decarbonization, how do we make sure that our energy usage is reducing the carbon footprint? That's going to be more and more important in the coming future. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
All right. Ethan, this fourth question is for you. What's been a positive and what's been a negative surprise in the last 4 to 5 years of your program as 50,000 When Ready has really come up?
Yeah. I'm not sure if there's anything negative to say. I mean, you kind of start from a baseline of 0 and you move up. So it's all been positive. But I guess one of the things that kind of surprised me is how many different programs and implementers have embraced the READY program. When we first designed the program, we kind of thought of it as a do-it-yourself way to implement an energy management system. But it turns out most facilities, most organizations need help, right? They don't have maybe the proper expertise or time to create a program. And so they bring in a utility program, or they bring in a consultant, and I don't know that we really expected this, but the READY program, with all of its different resources, the playbooks and everything, has created this way to kind of standardize. And so we're seeing implementers, standardize across their service areas, and we're seeing utilities use it and become partners of the program. So that's been a very big surprise. Also been surprised by how well the virtual cohorts have done. We talked earlier about the change as a result of the pandemic. The Federal Energy Management Program, FEMP, which serves government buildings, federal government buildings and organizations, they set up this virtual cohort using the Navigator, and they did it because they couldn't get people into the room together. It just wasn't possible. And that has proved to be a model that we're now using within AMO, the Building Technology Office is using, and we are going to do a cohort of wastewater treatment facilities with the weatherization program probably late this year, early next year. So that's been a nice surprise. And also the fact that the READY program, our materials are being used. People are setting up accounts around the globe. Actually, over half the accounts on the Navigator exist outside the United States. And we're talking with half a dozen different countries about creating their own READY programs. And so after years of trying to kind of push ISO 50001 up the hill, we seem to have created something where it's catalytically working on its own. And that has just been a wonderful surprise. And the other two things I was just going to mention is the fact that so many organizations are now looking at carbon. That's happened much quicker and much more than I thought I would see it. And I've got another thought, but I might save it for later on setting baselines, since I'm out of my 2.5 minutes.
Great. Thanks so much, Ethan. One thing, that you said that I thought was really interesting is that companies and programs, utilities are utilizing 50,001 Ready as a platform in the virtual world to bring people together to create a common language. And I think that's really interesting. I don't think we would have thought about that. SEM creates a baseline where you're kind of 60% towards 50,001 Ready just to begin with, right? Or ISO 50001, depending on what you're headed towards. But actually having that online platform already there and ready and not having to create things is really interesting. Thanks for sharing. All right, Walt, bring us home. Your question is, where are your recognition programs headed in the face of climate change, carbon caps, and decarbonization? Do we need stronger carrots?
That's a great question. And while the goal of the Energy Star program is to prevent greenhouse gas emissions associated with energy use by promoting energy efficiency, historically we have not factored carbon into our criteria for awarding recognition. So, like in the industrial space, we offer 3 forms of recognition: the Energy Star certification for the most efficient plants and sectors where we benchmark. We have our Challenge for Industry Achiever recognition for plants that reduce intensity by 10% or more in 5 years. And we have our Partner of the Year award, which is like a award for corporate SCM programs. Who has like a world-class corporate SCM program? And in all these kind of programs, while our program is about carbon, we've sort of not focused on carbon. It's just been a sort of pure energy efficiency. So we are beginning to look at these questions because of the greater emphasis on decarbonization, and are in the process of really examining how our criteria and methods for measuring inner performance might impact decarbonization. So an example is, because of our focus on energy efficiency, we've always been fuel neutral, but at the same time, this means that a plant could be super energy efficient, but really have terrible carbon performance because they burn a high carbon fuel like coal. So while they may be emitting while they may be emitting less than similar plants using the same fuel, is our recognition really recognizing a plant as a top performer in energy efficiency still really makes sense in today's market? And that's a question we're asking ourselves. We're also asking, what do we do when a plant switches from a high, carbon fuel like coal to a lower carbon fuel like natural gas? And in some cases that may result in a efficiency loss. So, do we need to normalize or adjust how we measure performance, such as perhaps using lower heating values for other fuels? These kinds of questions go on, like, are the metrics we're using helping or hindering electrification? Should we continue to use site energy and source energy? Again, because of how it might impact the choice to do an electrifier process. So, there's a lot of these questions. Another one that I think a lot about is, carbon intensity versus actual emissions. We're got these targets. They're not based on intensity. They're based on total emissions. So in our commercial building side, Energy Star will be launching a zero carbon recognition program. In the industrial space, I think a zero carbon program would be a lot harder to implement, but we are looking for ways to bring more carbon metrics and information to support our partners' decarbonization efforts. And as my colleague Betsy Dutrow will discuss later this afternoon, we really believe that energy efficiency is going to continue to play a really big and important role in decarbonization. So, we want to make sure we're asking the right questions, and we are providing benchmarks and recognition programs that promote both energy efficiency and decarbonization.
That's fascinating, Walt. I think that's really good, right? Is the way we're currently recognizing people just through energy efficiency enough? And what I'm hearing is, the EPA is grappling with this idea around no, but what does that mean? And where do you go from here? So it'll be interesting to see where you guys go in the next, 1 to 2 years. All right. So part of the idea behind these transformational panel sessions is to get audience engagement. So I'm calling this next section Stump the Panelist. So we've had about 4 or 5 questions to get us warmed up. In all transparency, the panelists did have these questions in advance, so hopefully they've warmed up. So if you have a question for the panelists, feel free to put it in the chat, and maybe Chad, you can help me look at the chat. Or if you also just want to raise your hand or unmute and ask a question, that would be great. If for some reason none of the 73 people on this call have a single question, which I highly doubt, I do have a list of questions as well in my back pocket, but hopefully someone will come up with a good Stump the Panelist question. And if you have it to a specific person, just let us know. All right, any questions want to come from the audience? Nobody. You guys answered them all. You answered every single question.
I have a question, Wendy. So this question is for Glenda. We're in this space where we're talking about decarbonization, and you're one of the panelists and also one on the call that is, at a gas company. So how does that SEM conversation, where we're really focused on helping customers reduce their costs, come into play when, obviously you are a provider of the low cost fuel, but having that context of decarbonization in your mind, is that SEM conversation different?
The conversation isn't different. We have always worked with our customers in a holistic way. So yeah, we address all concerns of our customers. If they are having issues in meeting greenhouse gas emissions, it's always been a part of our SEM program. We don't ignore it. But now more so because of the new climate change rules in California and the new emphasis on our goals as a company, we are now preparing ourselves to support customers more so, look at alternative sources of energy. And I don't know if you've looked at our website, SoCalGas.com, but if you look at that, you will see that we are exploring alternatives such as hydrogen gas and other resources. So we're preparing to help customers address that, even though we are the fossil fuel company.
Great. Thank you for answering that, Glenda.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
There was a great question that I think, given Tamara's answer, about people being the biggest struggle. Let's see, where was it? Let me get it. Okay, over the life cycle of the participation in SEM, when is the most common point where customers may lose interest, and how is that intercepted and overcome to keep them engaged?
Sure. So that's an interesting question. I think that what I see a lot is when a new customer comes on board, they're really excited in the beginning. They have all their senior management there for their energy management assessment, and they get this plan in place. But after that, if they don't allocate resources and folks to actually take on those things in the plan, things fizzle out from there, and then they don't see results. And a lot of what we say up front to help manage expectations is a lot of what you get out of these programs is what you're willing to put into it, because it is a time and resource intensive program when you're thinking about people and their time. And so that's sort of the point where we see, okay, they're not making progress against their opportunity registers. Their 5 kind of top things they wanted to do out of that EMA just are kind of fizzling, and they don't have an energy team together. So there's no support for that energy manager or champion. And then often there they just say like, well, okay, we've kind of lost focus, and what do we do there? So having like a skilled coach, having all of those other support pieces from the program beyond just funding to say have an energy champion in place, where we have training and we have folks that can come in and do some of those heavy lifts, are where we can sometimes bring them back on board, because then they can start to see a couple of quick wins and gain steam again from there.
I could add something. I think it's also important to, when you engage these customers, to make sure that they're setting some longer term goals. And goals not necessarily that are the same as maybe what the efficiency program has, but also for that company itself. Because that keeps the champion that you're working with focused on sort of the really what's in it for them down the road in terms of improving their overall performance. And to sort of get to John Feldman's question here about what other things could be in there. Sure, I work for Energy Star. We have recognition programs or other recognition programs as well. But I really do think that there is a really big opportunity to leverage recognition programs in these SEM programs, because it does set a prize for people who you're engaging to continue to be focused down the road in achieving something, and then giving them the opportunity to celebrate it. Historically, SEM programs that go in, they work with the customer for a very defined period of time. But if you want these programs to last over time, you gotta point someone for a little bit longer term horizon, and then also offer them opportunities to be nurtured along the way as well.
That's a good follow-up question. Thanks. Actually, Walt, you read my mind. I was going to pitch you John's question, so you got to it ahead of time. So Gail asks, and I'm going to open this one up because I think it's interesting. I mean, I have an answer for it, but I'd love to hear what the panelists think. And that is, what's the difference between strategic energy management versus just energy management? It's a bit existential.
A plan. With strategic energy management, you have a plan and a system, right?
That's right. I think you have a framework, right? You have a way in which you're systematically, proactively managing energy as opposed to proactively, like not proactively doing it, right?
But we've all had to deal with the acronym nightmare that is in the space of, what is an energy management system? There's like the technology and the practice and everything. And you can have a lot of technology, but if you don't have a plan and a framework, it's just a box with blinking lights.
Right. I think that's a really good point. All right. So we've got a bit of a, go for it. Did someone else?
I was just going to say, I think sometimes we can get into it. It can be a little bit of a semantics game. I think in the utility and energy efficiency world, there's a pretty good understanding of what SEM is. But I think if Ethan and I talk to our corporate partners in Better Buildings or Energy Star, and you say strategic energy management, they're thinking of something different. They're thinking of but at the end of the day, I think it's really about a continuous improvement approach, not just projects here or there. It's about corporate culture, organizational culture, how you measure and track, and those things, whether they're embodied in Energy Star or in ISO 50001 or just what companies have been doing for years. There's a lot of different ways you could call that. To me, it all is aspects of strategic energy management, but at this point, I think SEM as a term is really almost used for utility program designs, and that's that's fine.
Yeah, that's a different view. I appreciate that perspective, Walt. So Sam Day had a question. It's a two-part question. Walt, I'll pitch it to you to start it off. We've only got 5 more minutes, so we'll see. It's a doozy. With utility programs, SEM specifically, but others too, geared toward energy reduction rather than carbon emission reduction, is there a potential for gas and electric utility funding to be pooled together to incentivize fuel switching to lower carbon sources? Alberta has seen success at carbon-focused programs, but the funding structure is at the government level and not the utility level. Is there a mechanism that the U.S. and other regional programs could leverage to fund decarbonization along with efficiency programs? Woo!
Easy.
This is a big policy question.
Soft
and I think it's probably a policy question that, that probably ACEEE would be in the best position to probably address in terms of looking at what is the policies around, utility programs in the future. I mean, the history of how utility programs started, and many people who are on this call have watched how they've evolved. I mean, we are probably at a point where there needs to be a new discussion about what these programs play in the role of decarbonization, and it's going to require some changes. There was a comment earlier about cost effectiveness tests and things like that. I mean, does that make sense in the context of decarbonization if you're trying to push people to electrification, right? There's a lot of these questions, and I think it probably needs to become part of, we're talking about what are our policy options, to begin to talk about what are the roles of these traditional EE programs in supporting decarbonization and what changes are needed going forward. And to me, that's, it's going to be state policy, but it's got to be a national discussion about where it goes.
Yeah, and if I might add to that, it's a newer conversation. I think that's something that there's a ton of development that needs to happen still. I can give the example of what's happening in BC right now. And that is a lot to do with what our government mandates are too, right? So speaking to policy and what we can do that works within that. But we have government programs that in regards to specifically industrial customers offer incentives for projects that reduce carbon emissions. We are able to stack BC Hydro's low carbon electrification funding on top of those incentives to help push those projects forward. We're an electric utility. Is hydroelectricity considered, lower carbon for sure? So that's a benefit for us to be able to provide those incentives. And And the way we work that into our SEM programs right now is taking that holistic view. So an energy manager is being strategic. They're not going to ignore the fact that they also use gas, that they are potentially electrifying. So we build that into their plans now. They have certain electrification targets as well. And when they're electrifying, we build in the fact that they are electrifying efficiently and using the SEM practices and knowledge that they have in place from doing the SEM program to make sure they're leveraging that when they're planning out what they're going to do for an electrification project. I think there's still a lot of discussion in figuring out how exactly we work within the policy so that we're not overlapping and double funding things that are coming up that are new. But I think there are definitely opportunities, and this is one example of where we've been able to use both lower carbon electrification incentives plus the government funding plus SEM altogether.
Thanks, Tamara. I think that's it's really interesting, and it starts having this conversation, which we're going to be talking about actually at the SEM Summit on the second day. So we're going to be digging into some of the larger topics that our members have wanted to dig into, and one of that is around greenhouse gases, and the other one is around future design possibilities. Right. And so as policy starts shifting, as policy starts changing, where do we go? Where can we go? Especially as utilities' interests start changing. I think Michael Dean asked a question about non-energy benefits, right? One of the thoughts I had yesterday and then coming into this, although not focused on industrial, is we had a conversation with some tribal communities about how they really operate like a city, right? But they aren't being engaged right now. And so how do we actually support those who we haven't traditionally supported either, right? There's kind of an equity conversation in here. And so it's as things start shifting, how does SEM continue to take hold and really utilize the force and the power we have in the framework to actually move forward? So I think that's a really important point that you brought up. Thank you for doing that. All right, we have 1 minute left, and I could try to squeeze in another question, or I could honor the fact that everybody's sitting at their home and probably wants a bio break before they jump to the next session. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that as opposed to try to squeeze in the next question. I want to thank the panelists so much. Thank you for taking time to prep. Thank you for being succinct. Thank you for helping us get in as many audience questions as we can. And maybe I'll see you at the SEM Summit next week. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.